Welcome to lecture 11 part 4. In this lecture, we are going to cover JavaScript objects. We'll understand what is an object and what are the different ways to create object in JavaScript. Well, this is not a new topic for you because you already have covered objects in other programming languages. But let's have a quick recap. What is an object? Objects in JavaScript, just as in many other programming languages, can be compared to objects in real life. An object is a standalone entity with properties and type. Let's consider one example. Just as a cup is an object with properties, a cup has a color, design, weight, material it is made up of. In the same way, JavaScript objects can have properties which define their characteristics. So, hope you already have understood the meaning of objects in programming languages. But let's have a look now what are the different ways to create objects in JavaScript. So, the first way is an object literal, which is represented as curly braces. An object literal is a list of 0 or more pairs of property names and associated values of an object enclosed in curly braces. So what we do while creating an object, we give a name to the object, we declare the object using var, letter or const keyword, and then we enclose the properties within the curly braces. So let's implement a practical now. I'll be here taking the example of student object. So in order to create an object using the object literal, we need to use either let, var or const keyword. I'm using let. And then the name of the object. I'm taking student. So we need to use curly braces which represents object literal. These curly braces are called as object literal, within which we need to enclose the properties of the student. So there can be many properties of the student. Let's say name, roll number, registration number, marks, CGPA. It can be address, mother's name, father's name, and so on. So, but right now I'll be taking a very few properties, only 3 properties, so for simplicity. So first one I'm taking as name. How to define the properties? We use key and value pairs. So first of all, you need to define the key. Key is the property, and next is the value. So for defining the value, to assign the value to the property, you need to use colon instead of using equal to. If you use equal to, that will be actually wrong. So ensure that you put colon here and write down the first value. I am taking Rakesh as the name of the student. The next property I am taking is roll number of the student, let's say 19. And the third property I am taking is marks of the student, let's say it's 34. Right, so all the 3 properties have been defined. Now in order to access this object, so if you simply want to access the object, the complete object, you can write console.log student. And you can see that you're able to see this object, the printed object in the console. One more thing I want to add here, that you cannot use document.write here because object directly cannot be printed on the web page. In order to print the object on the web page, you need to convert it into JavaScript object notation, that is JSON. But we are not going to discuss JSON in this lecture. So all you need to use is console.log to print the object. And in the same way, we are going to access the individual properties. Now the point is, it is printing the whole object. Let's say we want to access the individual properties. So how we can do it? You can access the property using the dot symbol. Use the dot symbol and access your first property. So now you see that you are able to access your first properties value, that is Rakesh. In the same way, you can access your next property. So you can write here roll number. And then you have marks. So you can see that it's printing all the values in 3 different lines. Let's say that we want to print some meaningful message. Message such as Rakesh bearing roll number 19 has scored 34 marks. So for this, we will have to access the individual properties and concatenate it with using the string operator. Concatenate your properties using string operator with the meaningful message that you want. So access the individual properties student.name. So this will print Rakesh. What we want is Rakesh bearing roll number. So bearing roll number is a simple string, so we can concatenate it with bearing, put a comma, bearing roll number. Bearing roll number. And then concatenate it with again the roll number, because you need to access the roll number of the student. This you need to put student.roll. So Rakesh bearing roll number 19. Okay, till this much it has already printed. Bearing roll number 19. So concatenate it again with another piece of string. Has scored how much? Has scored student.marks. Has scored student.marks. So you can see it's printing Rakesh bearing roll number 19 has scored 34. Now let's consider one more property. Another property I'll take as intro. So in intro, instead of specifying any static value, I'm considering a function. So I'll be creating a function here. And within this function, I'm going to use this statement. So let's put the statement over here. So my statement is here, but you can see that it's not printing the statement. The reason for this is we are not calling this function. So all you have to do is call your function student.intro. And now you will be able to see the same statement. There's actually another way to print the same statement. Every time you're using the student, instead of using student, you can use this keyword as well. So using this keyword, you can access all the properties when you are within this function. Now, apart from this, another way to print the same statement is that instead of using these concatenation operators every time, you can use the template literal. So template literal is a new concept. So I'll just copy this, comment it out, and for your knowledge, you can use this in your JavaScript programs in order to access your any variable value. It's not only applicable to objects. So instead of using these concatenation operators, just remove all these concatenation operators. We will simply have this dot name bearing roll number, this dot roll has scored this many marks. Right. Now you can see that it's showing us an error. So what we have to do, enclose your property, that is this dot name, within curly braces, and put a dollar symbol in front of it. This dollar symbol actually represents the template literal. So you will have to do it with each and every property. Right now it's showing an error, but don't worry, it will go away very soon. So put a dollar symbol here as well. And dollar symbol, need curly braces, and dollar symbol here as well. So now it's showing us an error. For removing this error, you need to enclose the whole message within backticks. So backtick, you can generally find it in the above your tab key. When you check your keyboard, above your tab key there is a symbol backtick. So put a backtick here and put a backtick here as well. Right, so now you can see that it is printing the same message. You can see it's quite easy, and you really don't have to use the concatenation operator every time. And well, hope this is clear to you. It is up to you whether you want to use it or not. It's actually the latest concept in JavaScript. There is one more way to create the same object using object literal. For this, I'll first copy this, comment it out. I'll paste it once again to let you know the another concept related to object literal. So what you have to do here is just remove all this part, and now you are having an empty object literal. Now you will have to assign these properties using the dot operator. So you need to use student dot and the name of the student. Now instead of using, because now we are not inside the object literal, you have to individually assign the properties. I mean the values to the properties. So put equal to symbol. In this case, you will have to be careful or else it will generate an error. Student dot role and put equal to symbol. Then student dot marks, then equal to 34. In the same way, you have intro, that is student dot intro, and then put equal to symbol, and then you have a function. Now without any problem, it is printing the values. Here there needs to be equal to symbol, right? So now it is printing 19 here. Apart from using the dot symbol, you can also access the individual properties using the bracket notation. So using the bracket notation, that is the square brackets, and then enclose the property within inverted quotes, single inverted quotes or double inverted quotes. So you can see that using this statement as well, you are able to access the property. The second method to create the JavaScript object is an object constructor. They can be created using the object constructor, and we use the new keyword in this. So let's try with the practical. Use let student equals to. Now instead of using the object literal, we'll be using the new keyword and then object constructor. After using the object constructor, your object is created and you will be able to now associate the properties with this object. So after this, it's quite the same. You need to assign values to these properties, and using the dot symbol or using the bracket notation, you can assign the values to all these properties, and you can print these properties by accessing through either the dot symbol or the bracket notation. Third method is using Object.create. This method creates a new object using an existing object as the prototype of the newly created object. First, we need to create a prototype. So let's say the name of our prototype is student prototype. Student prototype, and our prototype is now created. Now in order to create our object, this is just a prototype, we can create another object now, an object with a different name. So let's say I'll write let student. This is the name of our original object. For this, we need to use Object.create function and mention the parameter as the student prototype. Right. Now what after this? You can start assigning the values to your properties using the dot operator, using the dot symbol or the bracket notation. And hence you can assign the values here and you will be able to print the values on the console. Next is using the constructor function. This constructor function creates function objects, and calling the constructor directly can create the functions dynamically. Let's now create a constructor function. So write function keyword and then the name of this function. So within this function, you can pass as many parameters as the properties that you're having. So I'll be using right now 3 properties, that is name, role and marks. Now within this function, we need to assign the values to the properties. So that can be accessed via this keyword, this dot name equals to, then this parameter, this dot name equals to name, this dot role equals to role, and this dot marks equals to marks. Why we are not writing the values here as Rakesh 1934? Because yet we haven't created the object. When we will be creating the object, that time we will pass the values in the parameters. So right now this is just a constructor function which will help us in creating our object. Now let's create our object. Let student equals to new student. Now we are using this constructor function, new student, and then pass the first parameter as Rakesh. Second parameter is roll number, and that is 19. Third parameter is the marks, and that is 34. So let's print the values. Console.log student.name. Right. So you can see that there is an error. It's because the name of the function should be actually different from the name of the object. So let's just change the first letter to a capital letter and student, and here also I'll be using student. Right, so now you can see that the console has now cleared of the errors, and it's now showing the value as Rakesh. In the similar manner, you can access your other properties as well. Actually, using the constructor function, you can create multiple objects. Let's say if I create one more object here, using the name of this object is student1, and I can simply change the values here. So let's say if I take here Ajay, and the roll number of the student is, let's say, 10, and marks is, let's say, 37. Right. So now you will have to access the properties once again using the student1 object. Student1, and here also you need student1. And here also you need student1. So now you can see that it is printing the values, the property values of the second object as well. Next is you can use a class to create the object. Classes are a template for creating objects. They encapsulate data with code to work on that data. Let's create the class as student. And we have to create a constructor and pass the parameters name, role, and marks. And we need to assign the values to these properties. So using this dot name equals to name, this dot role equals to role, and this dot marks equals to marks. Now let's create the object using this class. So all you have to do is use the name of the object, let student equals to new student, and pass the parameters as Rakesh. And the second parameter is the roll number, and the third parameter is the marks of the student. Now you can access the properties using console.log and then student.name. So it's printing Rakesh. In the same way, you can access the other two properties. Then we have factory functions to create the object. You can also create objects using the factory functions. What is meant by factory functions? The functions that can return objects. Let's create a function, and the name is student. Pass three parameters, name, role, and marks. Name, role, and marks. And we need to use this as a factory function, the one which is able to return the object. So use the return keyword, and within this we have to return the object. So that object is, you need to enclose the properties, that is name as name, role as role, and marks as marks. Now next is we need to create the actual object. So you need to use student equals to, use the name of this function and pass the values of your parameter, Rakesh, then 19, and then 34. Rakesh 19 and 34. And now you will be able to access the values. You'll be able to access the properties. Console.log student.name. So it's printing Rakesh. In the same way you can print your other properties. So student.role and student.marks. And the last one is creation of objects using Object.assign. This method is used to copy the values and properties from one or more source objects to a target object. Using Object.assign, we can create one object from multiple objects. So right now I'll be creating two different objects where we'll be having student info, general info like name, roll number and marks in one object, and the method, that is the introduction of the student, will be in the another object. So right now let's create the object as student info. Student info equals to name as Rakesh, then second is roll as 19 and marks as 34. And we'll now create a second object as let student methods equals to. Now we will now create a method. It's the same method that we already have used, that is intro. Right. So now we have to create the object using Object.assign. So let student equals to Object.assign. So the first parameter is the literal. Second parameter is the objects that you want to now use for creating this object. So we need to use student info and student methods. Right. So now you will be able to access the individual properties using the student object. Right. Console.log and use the name of your object that you just created, student.name, and then student.marks, student.role and student.marks. And we also have the function, and that can be accessed using student.intro. We have now approached the end of the lecture. So this is the reference to follow. And this is the program link. That's all for this lecture.